It's been almost 6 years since Devil May Cry 5 was first announced back in E3 2018. I remember the hype and excitement from everyone online. People were making memes from just the one trailer, a whole video of people just singing the game's main theme song, and with the announcement of a new game in the series that was set to release next year, I decided it was time to finally jump in and play through the series before 5 was released. I've always admired Devil May Cry from afar, but was always unwilling to engage with it. I would see the characters, the cutscenes of them kicking ass, and all the crazy gameplay, and always wondered if I would enjoy them. I loved hack and slash games like God of War, and crazy over-the-top action games like Metal Gear Rising. But despite owning the HD collection and 4 Special Edition, I was simply busy with other games at the time like Bloodborne and Persona to give the series a try. That was until summer 2018 when I played through 1, 3, and 4, and also about an hour of 2 before giving up, and finally began to see what made these games so special. When Devil May Cry 5 was released on March 9th, 2019, I was ready, and most importantly, motivated. I played through the entire game in about 2 days, and the experience was amazing. It's been 5 years since then, and with so many action games having been released since Devil May Cry 5 came out, is it still just as good as... Oh, who am I fucking kidding? 5 years later, and Devil May Cry 5 is still the best action game around, and I'm here to show you why.
Embrace the darkness that's within me. No hiding in the shadows anymore.
All is not well in the world of Devil May Cry. An all-new demon lord by the name of Urizen has invaded Redgrave City and has planted these massive roots across the city, spawning hundreds of demons. At the same time, a mysterious man dressed in black by the name of V has offered Dante the job of slaying this demon. Dante accepts the offer and goes to work. Meanwhile, things aren't doing too well for Nero either when a strange individual covered in robes comes to his place, rips his demonic arm off of him, and vanishes without a trace using the Yamato. When Dante and Nero come face to face with Urizen, they realize just how powerful the demon is, and both are overwhelmed by Urizen's sheer power. V and Nero are forced to retreat while Dante stays behind, his fate unknown. About a month later, and Nero returns to Redgrave City with his business partner slash mechanic, Nicoletta Nico Goldstein. Armed with Nico's all-new Devil Breaker and more motivated to take down Urizen than ever, Nero sets off on his journey to settle the score and save the city. Meanwhile, V is on the lookout for both the whereabouts of Dante and the Devil's Sword Sparta for reasons privy only to him. So yeah, pretty intense plot for what's supposed to be the wacky Pizza Man game. Devil May Cry's storytelling has always been such an overlooked part of the series. The series' head writer, Bingo Morihashi, always goes underappreciated, but I always enjoy his simple but effective approach to the Devil May Cry stories. I equate DMC5's story to a high-quality action film like Terminator 2 or Die Hard. Its story is simple but not stupid, and most importantly, it's not lazy either. Each of the main characters is given plenty of screen time and development, and the game is written in a way that both fans and newcomers can understand and appreciate. For example, take the characters V and Urizen. For anybody who's new to the series, you might be wondering about the origin of these two, and how V seems to be aware of who Urizen actually is. This casts doubt onto what V's true agenda is. Is he really trying to stop Urizen, or does he hide an even greater goal? But if you've played the series before, then you know exactly who these two represent. All the little hints and messages the game tries to foreshadow, and where this is all going. But the journey that takes place is just as engaging to a veteran as it is to a newcomer. I also gotta give props to Morihashi's writing on V's character. When you take a look at V's design, you may think he's the silent, brooding loner type, but Morihashi writes him as the complete opposite. Calculating, social, but also completely goofy. He controls demonic familiars through magical tattoos, uses his walking cane as a weapon, and reads William Blake during his spare time. You would think this would create an unbalanced mess of a character, but V is written in such an honest and caring way that he goes from some random newcomer into his own character, one that's actually become popular with fans. If you haven't, then I highly recommend checking out the Visions of V manga that details more about V and to a greater extent Virgil's character and help explain some of the gaps in the plot. V's fun character also makes the conclusion of his arc when he and Urzen unite to create Virgil feel bittersweet in the end. Hey, remember when Virgil being back was a spoiler? Anyways, I'll talk about Virgil more in detail, but Devil May Cry 5's plot succeeds because like all good sequels, it gets the player interested in its history. The game includes a history of DMC that goes over the previous games, but without much detail on each one. I feel like this was intentional, as it gets the player to want to know more about these characters and their stories after finishing this one. Perhaps they want to know more about Dante and Virgil's rivalry, or maybe they want to know how Dante and Nero first met. What Devil May Cry 5's story does really well is that it alludes to these events but never explicitly shows or references them in a way that feels like it's pandering. Instead, it gives the newcomers to the series an incentive to want to check out the other games in the series. For example, Dante and Trish's relationship. The game makes it clear that the two are close friends, but it's done in a way without having it spelled out to the player or by having a character just describe out loud that the two are close with one another. Instead, you can see it with the way they talk and interact with each other. That despite the danger and threat being greater than ever, both of them have dealt with these kinds of hardships before, and know that they can trust and rely on each other to get through this. It gives you a glimpse into their friendship, while also making you even more interested in how they met. Most importantly, Devil May Cry 5's story focuses on the characters more than anything else, and its characters are what makes the story and the game so good. For example, one of my favorite little scenes that doesn't get talked about all that much is the scene where Morrison tells Dante that he has a new job for him. All the scene really needs is to have Morrison arrive to Dante's agency and tell him about the offer. Instead, in addition to that, we also get a look into the life of Dante when he's off duty. And well, it's not exactly the high life. His office is pitch black, he has no electricity, and all Dante seems to be doing before Morrison arrived was to literally sit around and do nothing. It's a rare glimpse into the sadness of Dante's life and why he's so enthusiastic whenever he's on the job, because the job is his life, and he loves it. But when he's not slaying demons and saving the world, Dante basically shuts off both socially and physically. I've talked about Dante and V's character plenty enough already. How about Nero's writing? Well, I'm happy to tell you that Nero's writing and character has considerably improved over Devil May Cry 4. Not saying that DMC4 was a bad introduction to Nero, but I think it left a lot to be desired. They didn't really do a whole lot with his character. He was just kind of there for most of it, and then disappears halfway through to give Dante the spotlight. Here, in addition to a drastically improved redesign that makes Nero less like a Dante clone and more like his own character, they also give him a character arc that lasts throughout the game, about him wishing for more power, but lacking the motivation to seize it. They also acknowledge Nero's flaws, like his temper and inferiority complex. That deadweight meme is pretty much all Nero's fault, by the way. Dante says it once, and Nero never lets it go. But the biggest improvement to Nero's character is his dynamic with Nico. Nico's already a fun character as the quirky shop owner and mechanic to Nero's Devil Breaker, but her banter with Nero is both a lot of fun to watch and also gives Nero a dynamic that Dante doesn't. A chatty foil who can dish just as many barbs back to our trash-talking Devil Hunter and is a constant fixture. Another aspect of Nero that I really enjoy and find underappreciated is his little friendship with V. At first the two are cordial but distant, Nero unsure whether to trust V or not, and V seeing Nero as nothing more than an insurance policy against Urizen. But as the game continues, the two start looking out for each other, and you feel a genuine bond forming, culminating with V deciding that Nero is worth telling the truth about Urizen. It's a really nice relationship, made all the more sweeter when you find out that Nero is Virgil's son, and so retroactively we've been seeing father and son indirectly bond for the first time for most of the game. And I like to think part of the reason why Nero doesn't want Virgil to die is because he doesn't want the part of V that's still inside Virgil to die as well. Lastly, I want to talk about how well Devil May Cry 5 handles the passing of the torch from Dante and Nero when compared to 4. DMC4 did a really sloppy job at trying to present Nero as the next protagonist, while also keeping Dante in the story, from having Nero's whole story arc go from find Dante to rescue Kyrie, while also trying to create this half-baked character arc about accepting his demonic arm that goes nowhere once Dante shows up. It was a mess. And I'm glad to report that Devil May Cry 5 handles that passing of the torch in a much better way. While Nero is our protagonist and gets the most screen time, this story is all about Dante. From the setting being his childhood home, to finding out his backstory and the reason as to why his father gave him the rebellion, to him unlocking his Sin Devil trigger, having his story reach full circle as a demon hunter who originally resented his demonic heritage, the two have an equal balance of importance. It all culminates in the phenomenal final 2 levels of the game. I've talked about this a long time ago in another video, but to keep it brief, Devil May Cry 5's climax works as both a fantastic finale to the series, while also working as an exciting start to something new. Really, my only major problem with the story is Lady's lack of involvement. She's just kind of there for most of the game, and it sucks because Lady's a badass, and it might give the wrong idea to someone new to the series that she's the token useless human. While Devil May Cry 5's story is simple, its presentation is anything but. My goodness, does this game still look good. The environment, the characters, the demons, all running at a smooth 60 frames per second. What can I say? The RE engine is some black magic. This is the first game in the series that really takes advantage of Devil May Cry's urban fantasy roots by having levels be this wonderfully macabre mix of a modern cityscape and the hellish nightmare that's been grafted onto it. I think my favorite aspect of the visuals though has to be the contrast between the main characters and the demonic creatures they have to slay. There's been a debate about graphics on whether games should prioritize fidelity by creating more and more realistic characters in video games, or if they should stick to creating more heavily stylized worlds with the focus on creating their own identity. Devil May Cry 5 finds the perfect compromise. Its characters are real-life models scanned through, while also retaining their signature look and flair, while the style and design of the demons and the hellish landscapes you visit are amped up even further in the twisted department. It creates this amazing contrast between our badass looking heroes and disgusting villains. Now for this video, I decided to play Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition for the PS5, just so that I could play Turbo Mode and for Legendary Dark Knight. But in addition to those, the Special Edition also comes with a bunch of options for how you want the performance and fidelity of the game to look. It's a nice feature, but man, this is like the first thing you see when you start the game up. It shows up before you even get to the title screen. With Special Edition though, my biggest issue with the game's presentation has been addressed, and that was the god-awfully long load times when going from missions. What can I say about the voice acting? Everyone does an electrifyingly good job with their performance. Ruben Langdon, Johnny Young Bosch, Dan Southworth, they've all had years of experience voicing these characters, and you can tell just how natural it all comes to them. New to the series is Brian Hanford, who does a wonderful job voicing the enigmatic V, giving him a degree of twisted refinement.
He who desires but act not breeds pestilence. So it is written.
Okay, that's all great and all, but can we talk about the actual best part about the game's presentation? And that's the cutscenes pre-visualization. Okay, so I didn't actually know about this before I unlocked it, but a lot of video games pre-visualize their cutscenes now that a lot of modern AAA games are motion captured. That way, the actors and cinematographers know where they need to be positioned and what actions need to be performed. This results in an entire game's worth of live action cutscenes that was filmed in one studio and with no money. Seriously, this is some of the funniest shit you will ever see. It's like watching Garo if all it had for a budget was $20 and a dream. Now, as good as Devil May Cry 5's story is, and for how it's all beautifully presented, what matters the most is its gameplay. As a series that helped define 3D action games, Devil May Cry has set the standard for all action games to follow. It's fitting that the main theme of 5 isn't Devil Trigger, but Legacy, as Legacy plays an important part in not just DMC5's story, but also in its gameplay. Nero and Dante play about the same as they did before. Dante still has his 4 styles, and Nero is still designed for newcomers to the series to learn and understand. But their movesets have been expanded, adding onto their skills and ability to style on their enemies. But the two big additions are V and the change in level design. Now, Devil May Cry has never exactly had the most complicated levels. They were all linear, but 5 takes it up even further. This game is almost impossible to get lost. The levels are practically a straight line of combat encounters. And you know what? I love this change. Let's be honest, you're not here to play Devil May Cry for its rich level design and enemy placement. This isn't Dark Souls. You're here for the combat. And Devil May Cry 5 cuts back on the bloat like backtracking and obtuse game mechanics that other games were burdened by, especially in 4. There's not going to be a sequence where you have to roll around a stupid dice, for example. There are small bits of platforming, but they're designed to be a quick breather from combat, and they're not very long. There's barely any puzzles, well, I guess if you count hit the giant red vein until it explodes as a puzzle, and the closest thing to backtracking are these hilariously simple put demonic thing in demonic thing to open demonic thing. One aspect of the design that was changed was the removal of items. Green stars are gone. Now the only way to regain health is through green veins found throughout the level, fighting enemies, or in Dante's case, activating your devil trigger to regenerate your health. That means you can't stock up on them and use them during a boss to cheese your way to beat them, and the only collectibles you find are gold orbs and blue and purple orb fragments to extend your health bar and devil trigger gauge. That means the only consumable in this game are golden orbs. If you die, you can use one to revive yourself with full health and devil trigger, but with your rank taking a big cut. This is probably the most controversial design decision, because you can just buy golden orbs using real life money and just power through to the end. But I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever seen someone do that. I do find the idea of using red orbs to revive yourself much more interesting though. It actually adds a factor of risk versus reward of whether you should expend your own currency to defeat a boss and how much health you need to finish it off. At first glance, these changes look like the game is cutting features and removing mechanics, but I view it as the game trying to be simpler. Not in the make the game easy kind of simple, more like just pick the level you want to play and go wild kind of simple. This makes Devil May Cry 5 feel very pick up and play for me. By making combat the center focus of the game, it really makes it feel all killer no filler. And man, how about that combat? Devil May Cry 5 is simply put the pinnacle of hack and slash games. The combat is easy to learn, but my god is it hard to master. But when you do, oh my goodness, do you feel like a proper demon slaying badass. Let's start with Nero, the character that's designed for newcomers while still having enough complexity for veterans to find worth with him. Nero is easily the most understandable, approachable character in the game that anyone can play and have fun with. And he's my least favorite to use. Bastard, call me deadweight! Okay, let me back up a little bit. See, I really enjoy Nero's gameplay. I love Red Queen's combos, I love the exceed mechanic where if you time it just right, you can rev up Nero's sword like a motorcycle while you attack, and inflict even cooler attacks, and I love that his gameplay personifies who he is. Angry, spoiling for a fight, a punk who likes to show off but focus on the task at hand, which exemplifies his simple but awesome feel. But I have two problems. One is his ranged attacks. Blue Rose is a cool gun, but I feel like out of all the ranged weapons in the game, it's the least interesting. All it really has is charged shots. Compare that to the utter madness of Dante's gunslinger style, or V using Griffin to storm the battlefield with lightning. The other problem is a bit of a strange case regarding the story and Nero's arm. You see, with the loss of Nero's Devil Bringer comes the loss of his Devil Trigger and the grab and buster attacks his Devil Bringer provided. The grab has been replaced of course by Nico's Devil Breaker, a mechanical arm that gives Nero a grappling hook as well as an array of mechanical arms, each with different capabilities. The arms are a lot of fun to use, with my personal favorite being Punchline because it's a great arm to use while enemies are in the air, as well as being able to ride it around like a fucking skateboard. One arm even brings Nero's Buster abilities back. But that's kind of the problem. As fun as these new Devil Breakers are, using Buster on enemies was my favorite part about Nero's kit back in Devil May Cry 4. And now it's gone. Well, kinda. At the end of the game, Nero gets his Devil Trigger and Buster abilities back, and from here on he's back to his DMC4 self with all the additions of the Devil Breaker. So I guess it's a problem that fixes itself. But my big issue with the Devil Breakers comes with the fact that you can't switch which Devil Breaker you are using manually. You can blow up your Devil Breaker for damage or in an emergency pinch and switch from there, but there's no dedicated button that lets you switch whatever Devil Breaker you currently have available. You can't use Punchline and switch to Overture. You have to manually destroy Punchline and hope Overture is the next Devil Breaker. This is such a bizarre limitation, and according to Hideaki Itsuno, this was intentional, as the purpose of turning these arms into consumables was supposed to help differentiate Nero and Dante even further. Personally, I feel like this is the wrong way to go about it. The difference in Dante and Nero is their accessibility and how their weapons and combos create different forms of expression and show off their personality, not in how Nero can't switch his weapons around. I hope if the next game features Nero, then being able to switch his Devil Breaker should be a priority. But despite my issues, Nero still is a really fun character to play. He's accessible, fun, but most importantly still has the style and flair that makes a badass action game protagonist. Now on to quite possibly the most controversial combat in Devil May Cry 5, V's. While everyone seems to like V's character, his gameplay is one of the most divisive in the series. V is not a frontline fighter like Nero or Dante. He instead has to use his demonic familiars to damage them, but they can't actually kill the demons. That's where V has to go in and finish the job himself. You can see why V's gameplay is controversial. It's the biggest departure in combat styles that the series has had. Now, instead of getting into your enemies' faces and cutting them down, you're all the way in the back, controlling your demonic minions to do all the heavy lifting. I'll be honest, at first I had a lot of trouble with V's gameplay, but after changing some of the buttons and rethinking how I played, I gotta say, I love V's combat. While yes, it's not exactly the most active gameplay, V's gameplay still contains a lot of expression and style. He's the only character who can taunt while all his demonic familiars are torching the battlefield. How is that not badass? Out of all three characters, V relies on his Devil Trigger gauge the most. It's not only what lets him use his third and most powerful familiar, Nightmare, but also allows him to enhance his creature's combat capabilities and give them autonomy. You really need to make use of it more than any other character to really get the most out of V, since V is the only character who can manually recharge his Devil Trigger. This makes V's combat an intense ballet of dodging, calculating, and finally enacting. It really makes you feel like the enigmatic schemer that V is. Also, he charges his Devil Trigger by fucking reading William Blake. How can I hate this man? I think the problem with V comes down to his placement in the missions. Most of his levels come right after the hyper-aggressive Neros, so to go from him to V is what I think creates a lot of whiplash in playing as him. I feel like V should have been an unlockable character you play after the story, because with 3 characters and only 20 missions, one of them has to get the short end of the stick, and it unfortunately lands with our newcomer. Still, V is a lot of fun, and I hope a part of his gameplay manages to surface somewhere in future games. But while Nero and V are both great, our main man of course is Dante. Wow, where do I even begin? Let's start with his styles. Dante's main features are 4 different styles. Pressing the right face button activates the style. First is Trickster, a short teleport dash. It's designed to be a gap closer against you and your enemies, and the more you upgrade, the more teleports you have access to. Next is Swordmaster and Gunslinger. I'm putting these two together because they have about the same purpose. Swordmaster opens up more of your melee combos, and Gunslinger gives Dante more options with his firearms. Last but not least is Royal Guard, and activating Royal Guard puts Dante in a fixed position. He can't move or attack, but any hits from the enemies are nullified through Dante's Devil Trigger gauge. Now this all sounds simple, but the real fun about playing Dante is that all of these styles can be switched with the D-pad. This opens up so much possibilities for Dante's kit. Using Trickster to instantly teleport in front of an enemy, switching to Swordmaster to hack away at an enemy, then launching them in the air, and then switching to Gunslinger to unleash a rainstorm of bullets as they fall. And these styles are far more in-depth than just my brief little descriptions can provide. Master Trickster and you control the battlefield. Master Gunslinger and Swordmaster and your combo variety and style will be the likes of which Nero and V can only dream of. And Master Royal Guard and well, you will have mastered Devil May Cry 5. And that's without even mentioning Dante's sublime arsenal. Dante goes from his basic but reliable Rebellion and Devil Sword Sparta to wielding the Devil Sword Dante, a behemoth of a blade with some of the Swordmaster abilities built into it, while also possessing its own summoned swords. This is easily my favorite sword Dante has wielded in the series. It's the right mix of having just enough combos and skills, but not overwhelmingly so that it feels like all you need is just this one sword. Balrog and King Cerberus are great throwbacks to previous weapons in the series, with King Cerberus honestly having enough variety to be the sole weapon for its own standalone character. But of course, the standout is the Calviere, a motorcycle that Dante rips in half to create motherfucking dual-wielding chainsaws. In addition to being the coolest fucking weapon of all time, it's also just a great weapon to use because even though it's slow, it contains a ton of active frames for attacks and has a lot of heavy armor, meaning you won't get knocked down when using it. Dante's guns aren't nothing to scoff at either, with Gunslinger expanding their utility even further, from his trademark pistols Ebony and Ivory to Ladies Caliana Anne, which Dante can dual wield. And of course, there's Dr. Faust.
You've been struck by a smooth criminal.
A demonic hat that Dante can throw around as a projectile. It costs red orbs to use, but if you know how to use it well, it will repay you back with interest. Throw it on an enemy and they'll be rocking the hat. Mix it with Gunslinger and with enough red orbs, you'll be able to launch motherfucking meteors with this thing. It's beautiful. It is so Dante. High risk, high reward. It looks so ridiculous, but its power and potential is nothing to laugh at. All of this makes Dante my favorite out of the three to play. If you want a testament to just how much I love Dante's gameplay and combat anecdotally, while writing the script for this video, I just said fuck it and went and recorded gameplay of his combat just so that I could play as him again. If we're talking about 3D action game protagonists, then Dante just might be my favorite of all time. But right behind him, in a very, very close second, is Dante's brother, the Alpha and Omega, Virgil.
I am the storm that is approaching.
Virgil is power, pure and simple. Available only either through DLC or in Special Edition, Virgil possesses some of the fastest and most powerful attacks in the game. He's got his main sword, the Yamato, a katana that can cut through dimensions and with its own array of strong combos. He's rocking Beowulf from Devil May Cry 3, which of all the punch kick weapons in the series, might just be my favorite of the series so far due to its sheer power and speed. And replacing his Force Edge is a Phantom copy that strings Dante-like combos and attacks, just with Virgil's own flair to it. Lastly are his summoned swords, and they can range from guarding Virgil to having multiple at the same time unleashed at the demonic horde. This kit, Jesus Christ, this kit. It's visceral yet refined, it's cathartic yet disciplined, it requires a ton of time to master, and yet it is so easy to use. It is power. And I can think of no better moveset for Virgil to have than with these weapons. Combine that with his concentration mechanic that requires the player to literally act like Virgil in combat to increase damage and unleash your strongest attacks, a teleport that lets him rule the battlefield, and a fucking doppelganger of himself that you can activate with your devil trigger, then I can say, without hyperbole, that you don't get to feel like Virgil when you play as him. You must become Virgil if you want to master him, and I wouldn't have it in any other way. These characters are all so much fucking fun to play, and to have them all fully mastered is a journey that will take you even longer than the game itself. Because what makes Devil May Cry 5 the standard, the action game that all other action games try to be, is not just its phenomenal combat, but also everything around it. The style ranking system that's been with the series since the beginning and how it encourages variety and cockiness. How its simple alphabet rankings allow you to quickly understand that Devil May Cry isn't just a game about winning, it's a game about mastery. There's no complacency in combat, and Devil May Cry really encourages variety in style, with more points for you to use to upgrade your characters. But just like how Nero and Dante's movesets have been expanded and enhanced, so too has the style ranking system. Now, in addition to your rank, the rhythm and beat of the goddamn song that plays in the background also changes depending on how well you do. And man, when it's on A rank and the sound is about to reach the crescendo and hit the chorus like it's teasing you, just one more rank until it fucking explodes. Actually, let me cover the music in this game real quickly. Casey Edward more than lives up to Tetsuya Shibata's score for DMC 3 and 4, and his tracks are a fantastic mix of high energy and dark ambience. But of course, the real stars are the combat themes. Devil Trigger is a high-octane, extremely addictive song that really gets the blood pumping when playing as Nero. The chorus is just so much fun, with my only issue being that the build-up in my opinion takes too long to set up, and sometimes feel like the song is just wasting time to get to the real exciting parts of it. Being's Crimson Cloud at first didn't really do too much for me, but then I started listening to it in isolation, and man, this song's a banger, especially when the chorus hits and you feel the demonic strain hitting the song. Probably the most controversial is Dante's Subhuman. I'm mixed on this song as well. On one hand, I don't like the deathcore singing as it honestly makes the track unhearable to listen to at times, but on the other hand, the instrumentals are fantastic, and the lyrics are very fitting for Dante's character, resisting the demonic urge while also reaffirming that his human side is unkillable. But of course, how could I not talk about the song that's become more famous than Devil May Cry itself? Bury the Light.
Bury the light deep within. Cast aside, there's no coming home. We're burning chaos in the wind, drifting in the ocean.
This fucking song, everything from the instrumentals to the lyrics, is pure perfection. I remember watching the trailer for Virgil and thinking, oh, this new song sounds amazing. Then when the full song dropped, I remember listening to it, and when the final chorus hit, I then thought, no, this song isn't amazing, it's a fucking masterpiece. This 10-minute long industrial rock opera conveys Virgil's might, conveys Virgil's arrogance, but most of all, conveys Virgil's pain. And when the chorus hits after reaching S rank and the singing reaches its crescendo, God, I fucking love this game, man! It just gets you going! And all of this is tailored to perfectly reflect series director Hideaki Itsuno's background as a former fighting game developer. Hideaki Itsuno is the man behind Rival Schools and Power Stone, two underrated Capcom fighters that was the company's first steps into 3D games. Itsuno knows that practice and honing in on a game doesn't need to be repetitive or boring. It can be just as fun as playing the game itself. Devil May Cry is a game that rewards practice. It wants you to learn these characters in depth, and by doing so you not only find out more about what they can do, but what you can do as well. Combine that design philosophy with the game's replayability, my god! That video I made on how Resident Evil 4 and all the things it does to make it replayable, that's nothing compared to DMC 5, which was built to be replayed over and over again. From Nero's new arm and devil trigger to higher difficulties including the legendary Dark Knight mode that I find is the only mode worthy of Virgil's might, to the Bloody Palace, if you have to ask me to pick a few games to play while trapped in an island, Devil May Cry 5 won't be my first pick, but it will always be in my pile of games that I can play again and again. I can genuinely play this game forever, man. But while I can, some Devil May Cry fans can't, and are wondering why it's taking so long for Devil May Cry 6 to be announced. Even though Devil May Cry 5 ends on a pretty conclusive and satisfying note to the series, there are still tons of story ideas and games that could be made to continue the series forward. Personally, I want a Devil May Cry 1 remake, but I think an answer to that requires a look at how well the series does financially. Now, with DMC 5 being the highest selling game in the series, you may think that might have given Capcom the incentive to make a DMC 6 immediately, right? Well, it's a lot more complicated than you think. Devil May Cry is one of those weird series financially. It's a series that's super popular online because of the memes and jokes, but when it comes to sales, while sales of the series are pretty good, they still pale in comparison to Capcom's heavy hitters like Resident Evil and Monster Hunter. This leaves the franchise in an awkward position where it's viewed as an asset by Capcom, but isn't valuable enough to have its own division working on games in the series. And so the question of Devil May Cry 6 now isn't if it'll happen, but more on when it'll happen. And if you don't know, Itsuno's been a pretty busy guy these past few years, with his next game, Dragon Dogma 2, coming out in a few weeks. Maybe I should make a video on that. Regardless, with the announcement of a new Netflix series, it's clear that the series is still alive and well, and it'll only be a matter of time before the next game is announced. Devil May Cry 5, despite my constant praise so far, is not a perfect game. A co-op mode seemed like it was an inevitability with the way you could see other players in your game, but it felt like a wasted opportunity to implement them, especially for legendary Dark Knight mode. More annoyingly though, is the fact that you can't replay the game with just one character. That means you can't go through all 20 levels as just Dante or Nero. While there are points in the game where you can pick which characters you want to play as, the fact that there isn't a mode that just lets you play as just one of them from the campaign start to end feels like an obvious oversight, made all the more frustrating that Virgil's campaign actually allows you to do the exact thing I mentioned without any issue at all. But no game is perfect, but most importantly, no other game is on Devil May Cry 5's level. Even if there won't be a Devil May Cry 6 for a long time, 5 years in and I am still happy for 5's success, and a part of me is kind of glad that another game won't happen for a while, with 5 having become the undisputed king of action games, and for it to possibly top by the next Devil May Cry, well, then that game has to be something really special. And you know what? I have no doubt it will be, because Devil May Cry as a series is special. Devil May Cry is a series about honing and mastery, but also a series about having fun. To see overwhelming hordes of enemies, or a single menacing, all-powerful demon right in front of you, and to crack a cocky-ass grin as you know that no matter how much the odds are stacked against you, you'll come out on top with style. It's one of the most rewarding and satisfying experiences I've ever had in a game, even more so than a Souls game, because while a game like Dark Souls or Bloodborne are about overcoming oppressive, brutal odds and coming out through sheer determination, Devil May Cry also gives you that kind of difficulty, but not only asks you to win, but to look and feel like the coolest motherfucker alive while doing it. It's not just about mastery, it's about looking cool while you play. And if I may be so bold to ask, isn't that what all games should be about?